Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another episode of In the Frame. Today I'm going to be discussing April's indicator releases. This seems to have become a habit, but who knows how long it will last. Because in shocking news, I haven't pre-ordered any indicators in July. Shocking. Anyway, let's talk about April's releases. These are due out the 21st of April, I think. So we've got spy number 452, Little Man, What Now? This is a Frank Borzage film, presented by Carol Emily, starring Margaret Sullivan and Douglas Montgomery. Then we have spy number 455, Dangerous to Know, with a very young, clean-shaven, apart from a tiny little moustache, Akeem Tamaroff, Anna May Wong, Anthony Quinn, the very young Anthony Quinn, directed by Robert Florey. Then we have spy number 465, Behold a Pale Horse, Gregory Peck, Anthony Quinn and Omar Sharif, directed by Fred Zinnemann. And then finally 474, Spawn of the North. This is the alternate cover because I prefer it to the non-alternate cover. This, as you can see, stars Henry Fonda, George Raft, Dorothy Lamour, John Barrymore's in this, Akeem Tamaroff again, not clean shaven this time, Louise Platt, Lynn Overman, Spawn of the North, which is a wonderful title. Now, two of these are wonderful, and two of them are oddities that are still worth seeing, but they are really odd. And again, you can play at home and figure out which ones are the wonderful ones and which ones are the odd ones. Before I say, obviously my opinion is not fact. None of these you need to rush out and buy, I would say. These are perfect sale titles. So again, Indicator will probably be doing well, I suppose these might be too new for this year's sale, but it's not as if these are going to sell out again. There's 3,000 of these in the original run by Indicator, so I would say there's no rush in getting these, certainly not at full price, but they're all worth a wiggle. They're all worth a look. So we'll start with Frank Borzage's Little Man, What Now? Bizarrely, the two wonderful films I've got less to say about than the two ones that are a little bit odd. But this is wonderful. This is one of the wonderful ones. Now, Frank Borzage has really started to gain some steam, and we thank friend of the channel Roger Kirby, because he kind of started doing Frank Borzage films, and I've seen, well, this is only my second one to be fair. This is from 1934, and it stars the wonderful Margaret Sullivan. Douglas Montgomery, her husband in this film, is really strange. His performance is all over the place. It's a bit weird. But this is really political without being overtly political. It's set in post-war Germany, but as in Hollywood, everybody speaks with an American accent, and also they're all American. But it's post-war Germany. There is unemployment, difficulty to get jobs, is the simmering background of protest and violence at how Germany was left after the First World War. But we focus on Margaret Sullivan and Douglas Montgomery, who are a couple, and due to the stress of keeping your job, Montgomery works with a family operation, and the daughter takes a fancy to him and wants to get married to him, but obviously she's married already, but he has to pretend to keep his job. Which comes to a head, and then the film really follows them as Margaret Sullivan falls pregnant, as the phrase is, trying to get work and trying to make the best of a bad situation. You have this other couple that kind of is mirrored, but they're kind of the protesters, and they're the ones that are always pointing out the wrongs that are done to certain people, while other people seem to get away with murder and get all the breaks. It's a film that I shouldn't like, but it's absolutely wonderful. Margaret Sullivan's just fantastic. I didn't actually realise she died when she was 50, which is way too young. As usual, there's Sullivan and Montgomery, who again, it's quite a bizarre performance. That's the alternate artwork. Again, these all look wonderful. This looks pristine. It's a 2K restoration. There's a Fragility of Hope from 2025, which is 24 minutes, which is an in-depth discussion by Jeff Andrew, which is wonderful. A Ray of Hope from 2025, which is 19 minutes, which is an appreciation of Margaret Sullivan's career, by Thurza Wakefield. There's the original Spanish language trailer, if you're into that, and then of course there's the booklet. But this is just a wonderful melodrama with lots of layers. There's lots going on. This isn't just a simple 1934 Hollywood film. This is something a little different. And then Spy Number 455, Dangerous to Know, and this is the other wonderful one. This is just absolutely fantastic. 1938. It's only 70 minutes long. It reminds me a lot of Ruthless, the Edmund, the J. Ulmer film. Is it Edward J. Ulmer? That doesn't sound right. And as I said, it stars Akim Tamiroff, not looking scruffy. He's a ex-crook who's worked his way into society and pretty much runs the city. This is a rare, you don't see too many films with Akim Tamiroff pretty much being the lead, even though Anna May Wong gets top billing. And as I said, a really young Anthony Quinn, who's looking suave as F, as somebody in Blue Velvet might say. This is just a lovely pot boiler noir, because Tamiroff, who has everything, falls for a woman that he shouldn't fall for, who's already engaged. So his machinations of the underworld spring into action. Anna May Wong is kind of sort of his housekeeper, but also his confidant, who has feelings for him, but he doesn't have feelings for her. Anthony Quinn's his lieutenant, who sometimes makes bad decisions. It's just absolutely wonderful. Anna May Wong's fantastic. Tamiroff's brilliant. Everybody's wonderful. There's a real fatalism about it. And if you're familiar to this channel, you know I love a good bit of fatalism. It looks gorgeous. It's beautifully shot. Look at that image. Absolutely fantastic. Um, that's the alternate artwork. If you want a nice orangey red cover. This is based on a play by Edgar Wallace. I would say this is the best one out of the four for me. But obviously if you love your melodrama, you're probably going to like Little Man What Now. This is also a 2K restoration. There's a commentary with Jeremy Arnold from 2025. There's a Guardian interview with Anthony Quinn from 1995, which is 75 minutes long, which is actually a video recording as opposed to lots of the audio ones. There's a Nurse and Martyr, which is a film from 1915, which is 11 minutes long, which is surviving footage from Edgar Wallace's first ever screen credit. And obviously the booklet contains an essay by Pamela Hutchinson, an archival interview with Anne May Wong, a profile of Akim Tamaroff. Yeah, it's great to see Tamaroff getting a good meaty role. I was first familiar with him as scruffy little character actors in Orson Welles films, but here he really gets to shine as a character who definitely has little man syndrome. But it's just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, he's even got Dr. Phibe's organ in his apartment, which is just wonderful. Next, 265. Now we're getting to the bizarre, odd, uneven films, but are fascinating still the same. So this is Behold a Pale Horse with Gregory Peck, Anthony Quinn and Omar Sharif. Now the cover looks like it's playing on like Guns of Navarone or something, and it would be like an actioner, but it's not quite that. There's the alternate artwork. There's Gregory Peck wearing clothes. Now this is based on a novel by Emmerich Pressburger, who you might have heard of. It's directed by Fred Zinnemann. Fred Zinnemann spoke to Pressburger, and there were scripts. Pressburger did an adaptation, but Zinnemann didn't like it, so they parted ways on the project. Obviously at this point, Pressburger and Powell, or Powell and Pressburger, weren't a thing. But during watching, all the time you're watching this, you're thinking, what would Michael Powell have done? And it would have been a better film. It's 121 minutes long, which is way too long. I'm sure Powell would have made it about 95. It's bizarre. It's post-Spanish Civil War, and Gregory Peck is playing a Spanish, well, to the authorities, a Spanish bandit, a desperado, an exile. But it's Gregory Peck playing a Spaniard, but he's obviously just Gregory Peck. There's no accent, there's no... Anthony Quinn plays the general who's trying to get him, when Omar Sharif is a priest caught up between the two of them. It's shot beautifully. The scenes of the countryside and some of the kind of betrayal scenes are beautifully, it's black and white, but there are problems with it. Even Pressburger said that it's a ridiculous novel to try and film. The novel was told in first person. Every chapter of the novel was focusing on a different character. So this is a very internal film. Gregory Peck spends 70% of it in a room, and he's kind of hideout. There are some action, but not really action, scenes later in the film. It is a very kind of, again, fatalistic. There's a lot to like in it, but then there's a lot that's just baffling. Anthony Quinn disappears for about 40 minutes of the film in the second half. It's an oddity, to say the least. Again, when you've got the writer of the novel saying it's a bit silly to actually make this into a film. Yeah, but again, you're always thinking, what if this had been a Powell and Pressburger film? What would it have looked like? And as I said, I'm sure it wouldn't have been 121 minutes. But the cast are all doing their best. Omar Sharif's really good. Also, this is 2 years after Sharif and Quinn were in Lawrence of Arabia. Gregory Peck plays a different kind of character. He is kind of washed up and worn out and fed up. And this is like 10 years after the Spanish Civil War. He's still in exile. He can be quite nasty at times. There is a child who's involved, who at times is fine and who at times isn't fine. It's a really uneven film, but it is fascinating, even though does it work completely? Not really. But it's kind of, these 4 films are almost a microcosm of Indicator itself. There's 2 films that are fascinating but flawed, and then 2 films that are wonderful but underseen, and I certainly hadn't heard of them. Yeah, this is fascinating. I mean, music's by Maurice Jarre. It's funny that the book was actually called Killing a Mouse on Sunday, and it's also called Behold a Pale Horse. It starts with a quote from Revelations. So an odd film, but certainly worth checking out. Not as odd as the last one, but this one's a little bit odd. So The Pain of Exile is from 2025. It's 16 minutes, and Caitlin MacDonald discusses the film's production and involvement of Pressburger. It's a high definition remaster, but it still looks really good. It's a film that would look really good in 4K in actual fact, because the black and white's lovely. There's the Guardian audio interview with Omar Sharif from 1984, which is 77 minutes. Yeah, there's a 44-page booklet. So that's Behold a Pale Horse, which is strange, but it's not the strangest film out of the 4. It's Spawn of the North. Now this is bizarre. There's the 3 stars. But I learned from the extras that this film was originally attached to the wonderful Carol Lombard, which would have been interesting. So this Henry Hathaway, who's now got a few films in the Indicator range, it's essentially the Wild West, but in Alaska and fishing. So the seamen everywhere. This is about pirates emptying fishermen's nets. Obviously in this film, Akeem Tamaroff is again the villain, but it's the bearded, scraggy Akeem Tamaroff that we're used to. And George Raft and Henry Fonda are longtime friends who reunite. George Raft wants to buy a schooner, and he wants Henry Fonda to buy in with him, but Henry Fonda's inherited a canning factory after his dad died. And George Raft, because he's so desperate to get this schooner, he falls in with Akeem Tamaroff on the bad side, and Henry Fonda and George Raft become frenemies, I believe the phrase is. When you don't watch Henry Fonda too often, you kind of forget how amazing he is. Just his humanity, he's like a beacon of humanity, and he gives a great performance here. But the MVP, I would have to say, is Dorothy Lamour, who always plays kind of the bad girl, So she's attached to George Raft and kind of loves George Raft, even though George Raft is pretty much horrible to her throughout the whole film. But it's obviously that kind of love where you're just abusive to your other half or the person who loves you. Yeah, go figure. Meanwhile, Henry Fonda gets Louise Platt, who's John Barrymore's daughter, who again is kind of an ex-shady character who now runs the town's newspaper. His performance is John Barrymore chewing scenery, and then you've got Lynn Overman, who almost looks like John Barrymore, and he's kind of doing a John Barrymore impersonation, so it's almost like you've got two John Barrymores chewing as much scenery as they possibly can. It's from 1938, it's 110 minutes, again way too long, but the tonal shifts in the film are they'll break your neck. There's a wonderful performance by a seal called Slicker, who lives in a bathtub. There's one hilarious moment where, to get Louise Platt into his arms, Henry Fonda pretends to shoot the seal, and the seal's been trained to roll over and play dead. But he fires a gun with blanks at the seal. Ah, that's hilarious. So there's a seal in it. It has knockabout comedy. You know, Henry Fonda, when Louise Platt comes back, obviously she's older, she's been away for like 8 years. You hear Henry Fonda and George Raft singing as they're coming down the stairs. You know, the songs, well, it's not breaking out into song, but there's the songs in the Dorothy Lamour's hotel bar. But then there's like scenes of brutality in it. There's a really powerful, brutal scene as this kind of townsfolk, the good fishermen, if you like, are basically just on a shoot to kill of anybody who's found robbing their nets. So there's like some brutality in it. It's a huge production. I mean, they built a fishing village on the coast of California. So the set pieces with boats near the end of the film with harpoons, and I mean, it's really an impressive production. But the tonal shifts are just incredible. There's this, again, it's really some brutal scenes for 1938, brutal scenes for now, really, watching it. It's really odd. But Raft and Fonda, and as I say, Lamour's probably the best thing in it. And you have almost two John Barrymores. It's trying to do everything instead of kind of focusing on one thing. So it's trying to be a comedy, it's trying to be a drama, it's got a bit of musical in it. Obviously it's got animal stuff with Slicker the seal. I mean, there's wonderful things like when Fonda or Raft want to have like a shower, they just open the window and jump out the window into the river or into the ocean, which obviously would be freezing, but never mind. But I just love the fact they built a village on the Californian coastline to shoot it. So it's a really impressive production, but man, is it odd. It's a really enjoyable film. There's a scene with Native Americans performing a prayer to get more fish. The Native Americans aren't, it's a fairly favourable view of them. You want to kind of, whenever there's like Native Americans in films of the 30s or 40s or even 50s, but it's fairly respectable. You can play a drinking game Henry Fonda's character is called Jim and George Raft's character is called Tyler. So you can take a drink every time somebody says Jim or Tyler, because they say it about 200 times in the film. Yeah, it's a real oddity. The music's by Dmitri Tiomkin. Yeah, it's fascinating, it's fun, but it's all over the place. But I have to say, very much like Grey Lady Down, which had just an amazing special feature on the history of submarines, this release has one of the best special features I've seen for a long time. So again, this is just a high definition remaster. There's a couple of scenes that do have a bit of grain, but the rest of it looks really good. There's wonderful stuff with ice when the fishermen are wanting ice for their fish to go and shout at a wall of ice. There's a commentary with Kelly Goodner and Jim Hempel from 2025. It's a Breaking the Sound Barrier from 2025. There's a 26-minute piece which is an overview of sound engineer Laurel L. Ryder by Tom Vincent, and this is just absolutely fascinating. Ryder won 5 Oscars, including the Oscar for this, but more for the innovation of sound in film and later in the actual film. He was instrumental in VistaVision, and it's just an amazing story. He was also nominated for 14 other Oscars for the film, for films, but his 5 that he won were all for pioneering sound and image. I mean, I hadn't heard of him, but it's just a wonderful piece. It's really nerdy, you know, about the horizontal frame as opposed to the vertical frame. You get more sprockets. It's just an amazing 26-minute look at the history, pretty much the history of sound and also vision in the 50s, when television was threatening film and cinema, so they wanted to go bigger and bigger to, you know, take it away from the television, which was mainly black and white, and that extra, it's just amazing. So if you're interested in kind of the history of film, the history of sound, and you know, these guys just went into a lab and made this stuff up. You know, Ryder originally had like physics degree, and it's just a fascinating special feature. So this is definitely, you know, as I said, if you're into the history of film, this is definitely worth picking up at some point, probably on sale. The film it's entertaining, but man is it weird as far as the tonal shifts, but the extra is really worth checking out. So that's 4 more indicators. Again, for me, 2 wonderful ones and 2 others that are a bit head scratching, but still watchable. But again, I wouldn't particularly go and buy them all in full price. I'd probably wait for a sale in a year or so. But yeah, Indicator doing what Indicator does as far as kind of forgotten films that are definitely worth a look. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen any of these 4 films and what you think of them, and hopefully you'll join me again for more episodes of In the Frame. This is Soldier Ronan from Soldier Ronan Films, saying farewell.